Good evening. This is Ann Horner, and I am chairing the Facilities Committee meeting tonight. It is Thursday, May 1st. I will start with roll call to my left.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Tracy Oseki, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Yoga Pali, School Board.
MT, School Board.
Oh, Anne Randall, Director of District Communications Office.
Jessica Vinda, Supervisor of Facilities.
Anthony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
David Schrader, War Architects.
Doug Taylor, CHA Consulting.
Okay, great. We have a change in order of our agenda tonight. I wanted to see if there's any objections. If we could start with the facility studies, as we have Mr. Schrader, who does have to leave early tonight. Do we have any objections to starting with our? Okay, great.
I do not, but can I also participate in roll call, Nicole Cohn, School Board?
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, and I'll send it over to Mrs. Binda.
Thank you. A reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check, or additional details on a matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at crsd.org. For the agenda tonight, we have the master plan study, and then we have a full agenda after that, so please don't go anywhere after that. We have full day kindergarten furniture, rejection of wood, gym, and other floor maintenance service bid, and we have the recommended approval of the wood, gym, and other floor maintenance services bid, HVAC air filters bid, emergency generator inspection and maintenance services bid, certified laboratory services bid, grease trap and septic tank pumping and disposal services bid, grounds truck replacement bid, rejection of mail van replacement bid, the grounds equipment bid, a deduct change order, Council Rock High School North and South hot and chilled water pump replacement change order, South all-weather track resurfacing deduct change order, Schrader Group letter of assignment agreement, and Johnson Controlled Preventative Maintenance Service Agreement for Menesis. So we'll start, I'll hand it off to Doug.
Yes, thank you.
No, okay, so just point to me and.
Okay. All right, we go ahead. Thank you. So last time we met, there was a request for us to provide some more detailed budgets for a couple of the projects that might be considered over the next several years as a result of the master planning. So what I did with our team is put together some budgets for Chancellor Center, for Newtown Elementary School additions and renovations, for Welsh Elementary School renovations, Holland Middle School cafeteria reno and classroom additions, and South Stadium Phase 2. Click there. So just a couple notes before we start. These are our order of magnitude pricing based on the scope of work that we've discussed through this process. Generally, the budgets should be prepared for any further options as we discuss them. So if we're thinking about doing something else and putting it in this plan, and Tony's going to go out and look at financing, we should continue to go through this process for any other projects that you guys think might be valid as a part of this. The escalation factors are 3 to 4%. You'll see when we prepare the budgets, there's a 3%, 4% range, so each budget is going to have a low and a high range. The durations were assumed by us when I put the Gantt schedule together, just to give you an idea of what these projects start to look like when you run them linear across the years we're talking about. We did assume a June of 2025 approval of the design team because we had to have some basis of when these would be approved so the team could start going through the design and approval process. So obviously, the later that approval happens, these projects get pushed back, and if they get pushed back too much and you lose a summer to start your work or work within, you start to lose maybe a season on these projects, and that affects the cost at the end of the day. And we didn't include any environmental abatement as a part of these. We'll certainly assess buildings as we move forward with any kind of project. So the preliminary order of magnitude budgets, the first project that we have is Chancellor Center. I will tell you that the numbers that we have on here reflect the same numbers that I shared with you in the sheet that I handed out, except we've removed the 30% fees and contingency from each one of those line items, because when we prepared that for you, it had the 30% in it, so the total cost reflected fees and contingencies in the numbers. So we backed them out, showed you the cost without the fees and contingency to get to the 13.2 million. And then when you add the 20% hard cost, 5% design, 5% construction contingencies, that puts your 30% back and gets you back to a number that is very similar to what was on that sheet. The other thing, though, that was added to this project was, let me see.
Number 4.
Phasing cost, number 13. No, number 13 is added. That is the assumption that you're going to spend some monies, and again, probably on the high end, but we wanted to assume that you would have to have space to facilitate Chancellor Center staff for the duration of this project. So that's built into the total project cost, and that was based on $25 a square foot at 35,000 square feet for 1.4 years to develop some number so that we're not ignoring the fact that you need another home. So that added 1.2 million to the project, and as you go to the bottom of the sheet, you'll see the design phase duration of a year, the construction duration at about 1.4 years, years to the midpoint of construction, so that we can begin to determine what the impact of the inflation is. So we take 3% per year compounded to the midpoint. That's the 5.15%, so that's $888,000. If you look at the same inflation at 4% over compounded for that duration, you're almost 7%, which is 1.2 million roughly. So the range of these costs is in the 18.1 to 18.4 million dollars. So that's how we've established the cost of these, and that's a construction start in June of 2026. So these are projected to start in 26. That's why the inflation to the midpoint is pushed out where it is. That's how each one of these budgets will look. Is that mostly clear? Are there any questions on Chancellor? Yes.
Ms. Polly?
Yeah, thank you. So the medium renovations, I know you have the square footage times the, what does that really include? Because I remember we talked about what if we change the HVAC system and then we take care of the flooding in the basement? Is that what that is, or it's something more?
Yeah. All of the very top medium renovations at $35,180 at 250 a square foot for the 8.8 million, that takes care of all of the interior of the building. And then the rest of these items are all of the other items that aren't included in that total renovation number.
And then the phasing cost, the 1.225, this is assuming we're gonna move to the where?
It's just making the assumption that you are leasing space somewhere at that $25 a square foot over the 1.3 years while you're displaced from this building. It's just a placeholder to make sure that we haven't ignored the fact.
Okay.
If you go to Holland Middle School, for example,
Right.
or if you go to the old Richboro Middle School, for example, that cost is going to be less. It's going to be the cost to rent a chiller for 1.3 years, plus whatever other utilities you might have, and what other modifications you might have to make to tailor it to an administrative function there. So this number could be less. We're just simply we're acknowledging that you're not going to be here. You're going to have to spend some money to move from this building.
So if suppose we decide to just do the basic, which is like the line number 1, don't we also have to add like permits or
Yeah, so
station and so on? How much would that be?
this is not kind of an à la carte kind of budget. This is performing all the work within the building, performing the work around the exterior. All of the items we discussed addressing here is the total project that you might want to consider. What you're asking about, though, is soft cost, which is below that first horizontal black line. So there's fees, permits, inspections, furniture, fixture, and equipment, miscellaneous soft costs. So that 20% is what takes care of, the architectural fees, all of the permitting and those other costs. That's what the $2.6 million number is, directly under that first horizontal black line.
So someone could just take line item 1, then add the 20% or whatever, 5% to get, and then the inflation to get to like the smaller number.
Right. So all of these have basically a 30% soft cost
Right.
for design. Again, as we start to work on these, we're carrying a design contingency of 5%, about $600,000. As we sit with Andy and team and we talk about what actually needs to happen in the building, if there's some things that adjust that square foot cost upward, we'll have some money included in here to include that in the project and not come back to you and say, hey, the plan just impacted the price from the get-go. This allows us some room to do, and if we do nothing and we say we're going to keep it mostly the same, you're likely not going to use that $600,000. It's just there to make sure we have some acknowledgement that the design is not set in any way at this point. And then the construction contingency we would always carry. We'll have allowances in the project, but we would always want to make sure that during construction, especially in a renovation project, as they open a wall and they find something that we weren't anticipating, that we have money to take care of that. So all of those numbers added up to 13.2 plus the 3.9 gives you $17.2 million if you did it right now. But we're not doing it right now. So as you move to the next horizontal black line and go below it, that's what we're projecting to 2026. And that's where we have the 3 to 4% inflation compounded to the middle of the project. So we're being as accurate as we can with where we think the cost would be.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry, before we move on, real quick, I just want to highlight what Mrs. Pally was asking. The medium renovations, that's where we have the grouping of money for the HVAC and for the water infiltration, correct?
The water infiltration is covered in the line items for number 4. Allowance to install foundation,
Okay.
drainage system, and tie into stormwater. The square foot of the $250 per square foot is coming in here and performing all of new floor finishes, painting walls, patching painting walls,
And that's where you
lighting,
have the-
HVAC,
Okay,
all the infrastructure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of that is covered in that number, right? So this building will feel entirely touched interior-wise when you do that. Then we go outside, and that's where these other numbers come in, to do the painting, to do the stone repairs, to do the foundation work. That's not in that square foot cost. Those are separate line items.
so I want to just make sure that we're clear. So if the minimum project cannot be that 8.795 million.
I got it.
So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that if you're trying to go back to that minimal project, it's not that 8.795. There's other stuff that has to get incorporated in there.
Right. That number was just to compare square foot cost across the district for buildings, to give you ideas of if you did a total renovation, what it would cost versus doing capital improvement projects within your buildings.
That was a great clarification, thank you.
Should we go to the next, or are we?
I think we still have a
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just quick, so when we were looking at this last month or the month before, and we were looking at a presentation of safe, warm, and dry, 8 million versus a full project, there really was not, that 8 million really was not a realistic figure, is that what you're saying?
No, that's not true. There's different levels of work that you can perform in this facility. You could do safe, warm, and dry, which those items were identified, but you're not coming in here and touching all of the finishes. The building will be, the issues that are affecting safe, warm, and dry would be addressed, but you would not really recognize that much was done to the facility at that point. Right? It's not going to provide a total renovate, it's not going to put new floor finishes in, you're not going to repair walls and paint walls, you're not going to put any kind of new LED lighting in, not all of the infrastructure would be replaced. The areas that are problematic we would address the water infiltration. There's just select items, not coming in here and doing a total renovation project. So that was the 6.5. Then there was what's identified in the book at the 7.7. And then there's total renovation with all of these elements that are affecting infiltration and other things. And that's the number that we were asked to provide a more detailed number on.
So was that safe, warm, and dry also include repairing access to the building? Because all of that would have to get ripped up.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at what the safe, warm, and
So
dry
that was
numbers
still
are.
going to include the parking lot, the site?
No, it's not going to include all of the site. It would include
So that-
water infiltration because that is affecting safe, warm, and dry, but it's not necessarily going to put a new parking lot in. It's not necessarily going to put new lighting in. It's, there's other, it doesn't, I don't believe we add a generator as part of that project. Those are things that don't happen as part
So
of it.
that 7.8, we couldn't even use the building because we couldn't get in, is what you're saying?
Correct.
You couldn't even get in the building?
Correct. Yeah, while we're doing construction on either
No, I think-
option.
yeah.
When it's over.
Oh, no.
No, it'll just look the same.
Well,
You
that's,
could, but it
that's
would
not a
look-
problem, is it?
I don't know.
There's no programmatic changes. If there's spaces that need to be changed for programs within the building, if you need to combine spaces or create more private office space or create a training area, whatever those things are, wouldn't be accomplished as part of that project. That is simply coming in and addressing those high need items of the building that affect those categories of warm, safe, and dry.
But that's still an option.
And you may, so you're gonna, you're gonna tear things out and you're gonna get into the HVAC system, but you're not really gonna do much beyond that inside.
Mr. Tate?
So I think I just heard one answer from Ms. Binda, which is to do safe, warm, and dry. So tired of that terminology, but everybody understands what it means. The minimum. Safe, warm, and dry in this case just means the water infiltration and the HVAC, basically. Just,
They're the larger items, yeah.
yeah. That would require emptying the building.
Yes.
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 Yeah,
Any one of these scenarios to work here is
Yes.
going to require you to empty the building. Now, the duration may not be as long,
sure.
but you're going to, at least a half a year, you're going to be leaving the building to do these things.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Khan is on the line and she has a question. Ms. Khan?
Thank you. Okay, so I hear what Ms. Stone is saying, I hear what Mr. Tate is saying, and I know I distinctly asked at the last meeting that, we were going back and forth about the Chancellor Center and that we wanted, or I was looking for specifically 2 options coming back for this evening. So the warm, safe, and dry, which I have in my notes here, which addresses the CIP items, the water infiltration, including like the stairs, I think, and concrete wall. Part of the parking lot, which was going to be dug up due to the foundation work and the HVAC. So I have that at 7.7. I know it does not address all of the other issues that you're saying on this current chart that's up on the screen is not a la carte. So where do we have the 2 options of where we can do the major foundation and structural issues that we've been discussing versus everything that we want to do that's on this list?
So
It's not an a la carte item.
this is everything that was on the list that needed to be addressed from an exterior standpoint to address the water infiltration, and then kind of the domino pieces of that as we started to touch all of those items, plus renovations inside. it was 7.7 to address the CIP items and the foundation issues within the building. If you want us to go back and do that scenario with this format, you know, I could do that, where we take just the capital improvement plans with the basement and show you what that number is with inflation projected to 2026. We can do a second number for Chancellor. That, I don't remember that being.
Yes, I mean, I think, yes, that would be great. I mean, I think this is where we're having this constant conversation as this planning process is, 7.7 or even the 8.5 is a very different number for us to all think about when we're doing this planning process versus 18 million. It's more than double. And as we have other facilities and other projects coming up, we want to be able to somehow stay in Chancellor, save it, but obviously not have water running down the hallways or cement walls and have HVAC and some of the basic needs. So yeah, I thought we were going to get that this evening, so it would be great to get that to help us in our decision-making process.
Yeah, we can definitely add that and provide that as a second number for Chancellor. I apologize, I don't remember that being requested, so we can definitely add that.
Thank you.
Ms. Oseki?
I guess, thank you. I am kind of looking for an in-between number, if that's possible. So I am concerned about the building being warm, safe, and dry, of course, but also functioning. If we're going to move all these people out and do all this work, I don't want to have to, in 3 years, say, okay, well, they have to move out again because we now need to divide up offices or something like that. So I'm looking for an in-between number that includes warm, safe, and dry, and includes anything that would have to be done while people are out of the building. And then maybe the rest could be done, summer projects or some, kind of other way.
That number's not going to be far from this number that you're seeing.
The 18.
Yeah.
So that 18, we don't have any luxurious items in that. This is, if you would talk about, when you would think about renovating your house, you move out for 6 months and then you move back in and you want your house to be done. Sure, you're still gonna have to paint if you have wood exterior, you're still gonna have to paint in 3 years the wood. You might have to do your roof because you chose not to do the shingles. But on here, this is a complete project. So unless we talked about specific line items that we could possibly remove, the number's not gonna be much less than that. Because if you just look at some of the individual line items.
Yeah, I recognize that the individual line items are significantly lower than, of course,
So
number 1 and number 4.
If you looked at item number 3, emergency generator and associated site work. Yesterday, we had Pico go down, I don't know how many times, 5, 6 times throughout the day, that we probably lost at least 3 hours of productivity just in this building because power was going down. Now, if we had a generator, it would eliminate that. I think there was last year, we had to cancel, was it a facilities meeting we had to cancel because we didn't have any power? So could we eliminate that? We could. If we wanted to save $400,000, we could talk about eliminating stuff like that. But all of our other buildings in our district, except for here and Twining Ford, have backup generators. So there's stuff like that we could eliminate, but $400,000 when you're looking at 18.4, it takes you down to 18 million.
Line item 7 is the only one where you could say, well, doesn't the renovation cost cover, plaster repairs? And I'm going to say, yes, it generally covers plaster repairs and painting. However, there's some excessive repairs. So I put this in, I know the boardroom ceiling is not a simple go in and patch cracks and paint. It's likely take it down and probably put, drywall up and refinish the ceiling. I know the business office had some areas that were problematic. So there's some that are not simply patching, it's tearing them down, putting framing in and putting new ceilings in. So that's why I carried a little bit more in here to make sure that we weren't ignoring some of those more major things that need to be done.
I don't think there's kind
Really
of
not a lot of
fluff.
ancillary things.
Yeah.
They're really direct items that need to be addressed.
Pardon me, I have an obligation I can't avoid, I'm so sorry. Doug has all the information anyway. Just a reminder, this is all being done as budgets. There have been no documents, no, deep investigation of projects, and things will obviously change as projects evolve. So these are budgets, and, going from 18.1 to 18.4, or whatever the number, 18.1 to 18.4, could go up or down. So it's an order of magnitude like Doug's saying, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I'm so sorry.
It is.
Thanks.
So we'll prepare the other number, we'll clarify exactly what's in it, because it won't necessarily, we'll have to break out the line items a little differently to try to give you clarity on exactly what the other number would include or not include, so.
Mike?
Thank you. Just in some cases, to ensure clarity of all of us, we've talked about it a couple different ways. But what we're looking at right here is still an order of magnitude budget for a complete project. But there is really no way to get back to what we've all called warm, safe, and dry from this. And I agree with Mrs. Khan, it would be helpful to have that. And thank you for allowing that. And the other thing that is concerning here for me is the construction contingency of 5%, which for an over 100-year-old building concerns me, because this is not your typical construction project of finding out what's behind the wall, or more to the point, finding out what's underneath the dirt. So there 5%, which comes into what do you got, about $500,000, well, almost $700,000. That could go up significantly if, as I've stated before, you find out that you need to do underpinning or significant structural repair to the foundation. So I think that construction contingency for this project on an order of magnitude element should be higher. Not that I want it to be higher, but this 18.1 to 18.4 could be millions of dollars more expensive beyond 18.4.
So and I agree, and you're right. But we have to be cautious about, we're already at 30% fees and contingency, which starts to look like you're really being overly safe with your estimates, you know what I mean? So we do have some numbers in the numbers of, our lump sum numbers above to try to carry some of that in some cases. And as David said, this is just an order of magnitude budget. As you know, we do a lot of investigation. So if you say, hey, this is a project we're absolutely doing, we're gonna we'll probably hire a contractor to do some minimal, physical investigations to try to, as we go around the building, figure out what is happening. We bring a geotech, whatever it is we need to do, to follow this through. But I agree, we are carrying some numbers. Some will be less, some will be more.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it would be nice to carry a 10% construction contingency into the actual construction after we've developed a scope and put together the final budget for sure.
Right, so if either this or the warm, safe, and dry gets looked at, either way, when we get closer and tighter to real numbers, that's where that 10% could come in and we could have more contingency for foundation problems. Great. The next thing puts Dr. Sanko, Mr. Rapp, and Ms. Binda a little bit on the spot. As far as the organization of this building, rooms adjacent to other rooms, the way your team works, the way, how many times do you go up and down stairs, for example, in the course of the day? Are there individuals and areas, for example, not to call them out, but transportation, for example, do they go up and down stairs a lot? Do they go to the third floor, or could they be parted out somewhere else? Does all that work?
I go up to Tony's office 4, 5, 6 times a day. So, I mean, but you're going, no matter where you're at, you're going to be walking or going up and down the steps, because we can't put everybody on one floor.
This is my point, as far as the adjacencies, is your team layout, the way this whole building functions, are you adjacent to the people that you need to be adjacent to? Do you have the qualities of a building functioning to get your work done the way you need to get them done?
I think we've tried to accommodate it as best as we can. I think that there's areas where there's space, a lot of wasted space, that is just an empty area. But, you know, we do our best. We, you know, took years. One of the goals of Dr. Sanko was to put HR and the business office in proximity to each other. We did manage to do that. It wasn't without growing pains, and it's certainly not the ideal situation. But, you know, there are inefficiencies, like there's so much work that happens between HR and the business office that having them next to each other is ideal, but it is best for it's brought the departments. It's created a better relationship between the departments. But again, I'd say that the situation is not ideal, but we've done our best with that. But if you go up in the business office, I don't know how many of you have been up there, there's offices on the one side, and then there's a wide open area where it's kind of like file cabinets, and that's, you know, if we were doing something like this, you know, we would just, like, the full thing, I want to look at how we can better maximize that space to accommodate HR and the business office being in there together, and, you know, certainly put sides that work close to the HR people that do payroll or time sheets, and that closer to the people who do the payroll, just as an example. And as far as, you know, going up and down the stairs, Ronnie, the HR director, and myself probably, I would not bet against us being the two people who walk up and down the stairs the most in this building.
No, I do. It's, Tony described it well. We have made improvements. HR and business is a good example of success. But one where we don't have the room to move is all the education directives. So the special education department is too big to get on this floor with the director of elementary and secondary ed. So we've got most of the education folks on this floor, including curriculum and instruction and data analysts, but because of the size of the special ed department, we don't have the room to put them on this floor.
So not that walking up and down stairs or moving around is something that we're trying to accommodate or something that we're trying to eliminate, but it points to a lack of efficiency that occurs with this current layout. And Doug, coming back to you, regarding what you just heard, speaking a little bit for David, we'll work together a little bit on the understanding of design idea between an architect and an estimator. This building has certain structural framing practices that get really expensive if you're trying to adjust it. And obviously, we can't expand the footprint and put all of these floors on one floor and still have a parking lot, right? So do either of these, the warm, safe, and dry, which I know doesn't, because we're not touching interior stuff, but to the estimate that we're looking at right now, does that factor in opening up walls, reframing structure to accommodate efficiencies, and solving some of the issues that you just heard? In other words, is there any design element? We've got a design contingency of 5% also about $700,000, and obviously there's design costs in here. Is factored in any of that design discussions with the administration to understand on ways to maximize efficiency and reorganize the floor plans or layouts, as somebody might say, for all of these floors? And would it address some of or all of the concerns that you just heard?
Some, definitely not all, right? I mean, I don't know because this is just an order of magnitude number. We haven't had programming meetings, we haven't heard from each department in terms of what their wants and needs are. As you know, we'd have to sit and develop what you call a program, and we understand what each group needs, what the HR group needs, what special services needs, what Andy and his team need, Tony's team, and so on, transportation. And then we take a look at what those programs are, what the square footage of each one of those are, and we put a total number, on a spreadsheet. Then at the end of that, there's a grossing factor, right? Which, we have to back into a grossing factor in an existing building because grossing factor means you need, the corridors, the storage space, the spaces that support that program. If they say we need 3 offices at 100 square feet each, that's 300 square feet, but you also need hallways to get to those offices, and you need storage for those offices, and there's usually a grossing factor of 1.6 or something like that, so you take the 300 times 1.6, come up with whatever that square footage equals at that point to, just for that, but you do that for everybody's space and it starts to grow the building. Is it possible that, when you look at all of that the program has outgrown the building? I don't know that answer because we haven't had these kind of meetings. So we have to work within the building that we have first of all. And, can you come into a space? I'm not suggesting we're getting rid of historic classroom 1, but if you said we want to open up a wall and we want to put a hallway waiting area out here and we want to take every 2 windows and put, or every other window and put a wall and create office spaces within here, that fitting this room out would be in that 250, but the knocking this wall out, as you said, you're going to be limited to how much wall you can take out, right? Because first of all, we don't know what the wall is constructed of. We're not sure what the bearing is downstairs. If it's a non-load bearing wall, as you know from watching many reno shows, which everyone talks about, it's not a big deal. But if it is a load bearing wall, then clearly you're coming in, putting temporary shoring in. You pay as much for the temporary shoring as you do for the final fix, right? It's kind of like highway work. They pay for all those temporary roads and all that, and those project costs are double, but you only half of the money really went to the improvements. So we start to have to manage those kind of things. So if there's a little of that design contingency would cover it. If there's something significant that we're unaware of, then we'd have to say, hey, our budget from schematic design to design development is increasing because of these 4 things, right?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple extra details, both as foresight moving forward, but also to explain some differences of what we're looking at, what we could be looking at. And my last question, Doug, would be what would happen if going through the programming phase, talking to all the departments, finding out what they need, you realize that the program for this building has grown and that there's no way to accommodate everything that everybody needs, and it would even be difficult to accommodate 75% of what everybody needs. What would, in your process, be the recommendations at that point?
Well, then we'd have to regroup as a team and say, hey, are you going to try to, fit the programs within this building and challenge, possibly compromise some programs? The impact of the programs could vary depending on what you're doing here. Or you'd have to decide on another option at that point. I don't know that expanding this building on this site is really a viable option. I think that would be a challenge based on the amount of parking you already have. And, we'd have to have that conversation. Like, we had programming, we understand you need 35,000 square feet, but your program's telling us you need 50,000 square feet. Then we have to decide, we would provide those options. Here's the cost to renovate this building based on the program that we've just established, to grow the building, or to find that program elsewhere you're looking at, whether it's the old middle school. It really just depends on what we learn. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of moving parts right now. We're trying to hone in on a solution, and then we can, these budgets start as an order of magnitude. Then we sit and we have a programming meeting and we put together the schematic budget. And then we move into the design development budget. We take the schematic design, now we start to turn that into hard lines and something that really starts to fit and show you how all these programs work. And then we move into that kind of, construction documentation phase. And then you have a 30, 60, 90% review as you go. So we're constantly watching these budgets as we go. So this is the very, very first look at what it could cost.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask some of those questions to add a little bit of element to this.
Ms. Osaki?
Thank you. The Safe Dry 7 points, well, I guess to preface it, right now, a lot of the basement is unusable. In the warm, safe, dry scenario, does the basement become usable?
So it would, right, because if we address that water infiltration, there's at least, I think, two spaces that could become functional office spaces that aren't now.
Right now, those are just empty.
Or it could become multiple, larger spaces or, however you would divide the space up. But there are at least two offices that.
Is that basement included in the square foot, the 35,000 square feet?
It is.
So currently, we're not using 35,000 square feet. Currently, we're using, 25,000.
Right, there's other square footage you're not using as well, right? The boiler, mechanicals, because that's taking the floor plate, overall floor plate and stacking it and saying that's, the square footage. So it's not all functional square footage.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hidalgo?
So when we talk about the 35,000 square foot, and then we're also hearing about void space, unusable space, and then parts of the basement that are unusable, that's all included in the 35,000 estimate. I mean, in the total of this building. So we're actually working with less than that now, and because it's not efficient, as you said. Not gonna say the word efficient, but there's, as you said, space that's not being utilized. So maybe just get an idea, analyze that a little bit, just rough it out. Maybe you could do that.
It's not a whole lot of square feet. We're talking less than 500 square feet, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's two offices.
and including the basement,
It's two offices in the basement that we can't use.
and then the cabinet areas, stuff like that. Right, so so that's, you say 500 out of 35,000?
It's difficult to make a building like this as efficient as you would. If you were to create a new building, renovate something with open space where you could create new spaces, the efficiency is far greater
Sure.
than trying to make it fit within existing stair towers, within existing bearing walls, within elevators. And this building, has several iterations of building within it. So it's been modified before. So that
Okay.
challenges it a bit.
Thank you.
You ready for the next slide?
Any other questions on Chancellor? Mr. Tate?
Just a quick question and comment. I think it's interesting to talk about, the process as you go forward in developing the program for the building. And Mr. Taylor's talked about this before, that it involves meeting with the stakeholders. That's what happens every time we do a renovation project. I remember that discussion, for example, with the elementary schools. And it's interesting to think about what the designers would learn from our current occupants of the building about its current use. I can imagine coming to a conclusion that, boy, we got to make more changes than we thought, or coming to the conclusion that this building works fairly well, and there's some efficiencies to be gained by making this adjustment and this adjustment and this adjustment. But my overall impression is that this building works pretty well for its current uses. Am I wrong, Dr. Sanko?
No, you're correct.
Okay. So that's an unknown that we would only know getting into the process. That's
helpful. I mean, it's just a matter of understanding, how we carve the building out. Really, the only thing, what we learned from that programming meeting, and as a result of making it fit within the building footprint, is what walls, could be challenged or compromised that we might have to work with as a result of that that programming session. So that would affect the budget in some way. So we would learn more of that next stage.
We had an email this week from Dr. Senko. I was wondering if that information regarding Chancellor and the potential grants, I was wondering if is that public at this point, and if it is, could you explain it? And if it's not, I'll sit my lip.
So we continue to work with Brian Fitzpatrick's office. We've made some grant applications, and we've been in regular contact with one of Kyle Melander from that office about grants. So we're moving through the process to see if there's anything we can do by way of grants for this building. We got some good advice in our last conversation, and our next step administratively, we have about a week or 2 weeks to get something back to Kyle to see if Chancellor Center would be a property or a building that might qualify for these grants.
Any idea when we would know?
I don't know when we would know.
And do we know how much?
So they give us a questionnaire, and it's a very extensive questionnaire because I already started to fill it out. Tony and I are going to work on that, try and get that out as soon as possible. And then they use the questionnaire to determine if we're eligible. So the questionnaire is step one.
Right, but what I'm trying to understand is, are we talking about like $200,000 or we're talking about
No.
like 5 million?
No, we would be asking for millions, several million, 4 to 7 million. And again, we would work closely with Kyle Melander, who will have to kind of shepherd us through this. If at the next step, once we complete what Andrea just talked about, we would be asking the borough for a conversation, and then our local legislators for support on this effort. So right now, there's a lot of information we don't have.
That's reassuring though.
Any other questions?
Just a comment though, just because we apply for a grant doesn't mean we're going to get a grant. As we move forward, we have to assume we're getting $0. Unless we're going to wait until that decision comes in and then see how we're going to proceed. Which,
I'm sorry.
and the grant process, I mean, it's going to, I don't think it's something that we're going to find out in the next month or two, is it? I wouldn't
It's a
imagine.
fiscal year 26 grant.
Right, so we're looking at possibly a year down the road to find out what we possibly may get. So I don't think, for our purposes, it's wise to think that we're going to get a dime at this point. And we should make our decisions based on that, and if something were to come by, then great, that would be even better, but I don't want to say don't get your hopes up. You just never know what's going to happen with grants.
The only thing I'd offer on the grant is, a lot of the grants, there's timing associated with, not every grant, but there's timing associated with when construction needs to happen or be completed, right, for the funding. So it would be important to understand that you want to make sure that you don't put yourself behind the 8 ball or out in front of it if the completion has to be, wrapped up within a certain timeline. So,
And I think our first step with Kyle is to see if this building actually, if the grant would actually support our ask for this building, being a school district building.
yeah.
So these grants come to the Bureau of Housing and Urban Development. And I could share the link that explains, they're looking for it's called community project funding. And it's directed by Congress, so the congressperson nominates a project that they would like to have funded. So you're getting a piece of the pie, basically.
Yeah, they're all, some are shovel ready. It's got to be shovel ready. Like, it depends what the grant language says, would also dictate if it'll help you guys or not. Good luck, that would be good.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
One more. So just to go back, I know we talked last time about other options, and I think we talked about leasing space somewhere. And one of the options was to buy a building for like $5 million, 5 point something, right?
That was
One of the
building that was
options.
shown to us.
Yes, or maybe something else that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
So it's good to keep that, in the back of our minds as we look at costs and, what are the possible options before, and I know we have the warm, safe, and dry numbers coming back next.
I'm gonna put a new number together for you
Okay.
guys, so you have, I will clearly define every line item so that we're on the same page with what it includes.
I have, go ahead,
I
Mr.
would just say we would need that for the grant as well.
Tomorrow?
How'd you guess?
I just wanted to follow up on Ms. Pally's question, because this is actually, I was wondering about this. We talked about how new construction has to be adjacent to a school building, right?
Yes.
For an administrative building, and that school building has to be a certain number of square feet or something like that.
Yes.
Are we allowed to buy? Is there a loophole, or are we getting our hopes up about something that we may not even?
You're allowed to buy up to a certain dollar amount, from what I'm not an expert on this.
That seems like it would be important to know.
But we first of all, just so we're clear on what you're allowed to build, it has to be connected
Yeah.
to a school building. And it has to be a school building project worth a certain dollar amount. So basically, if we were to build an elementary school, we could not attach to that because the cost would, the school project would not be enough to do that. There are certain amounts that you can purchase property for, but you couldn't build onto that property then, so, without.
So I guess I would like to know, what is that budget that you can buy a building for,
What's the actual?
34.
34. I will get back to you on that.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
All right. Jess?
Yep,
All right,
sorry.
before we go on to the Newtown, we have guests here that might have questions for us on the public comment on the Chancellor Center, because we are going to continue to go on. We also have a whole bunch of other stuff, so we don't want to hold you up. If you have anybody have any public comment? You do? Okay. Just remember, we got 3 minutes.
I really appreciate you doing this. There's 2 comments I want to make. I just want to say that Mrs. Khan mentioned, a number of people mentioned that this number that was given for general renovation costs on a set ratio, that there's no really breakdown on self-warming drive and doing the whole project. So if someone comes to me, my husband says, we want to spend all this money, and I'm gonna say, what is this all for? What do I really need? Because that's something I'm always looking at, finance reasons. So I too would love to see, and I will be at the next meeting, hopefully, to see that difference, another version, like you did for the proposed South High School stadium. You broke it down to 2 different numbers. So I would hope that you could do something similar for that for Chancellor. Second comment on efficiencies and working and how a building's set up. I retired a 1.5 years ago from a Fortune 500 company. And we had 3 buildings. I worked with compliance, HR, applications, legal. We were not all in the same building. We were not all on the same floor. We were spread across 3 buildings. It's called Zoom meetings, emails, And if we had to get together, we would get together. I was not going in and out of somebody's office all day. I would say that is highly inefficient. I had to put my questions together, pose an email, if I needed to do a follow-up Zoom. We were a public company, we were accountable to our stockholders, we the taxpayers are kind of the stockholders. So to me, it's nice if you could refigure a building to quote unquote make yourself more efficient. But I would also say, as an employee who worked for this company over 5 years, I figured out with that working situation how to be efficient. Thank you.
Yes. Probably can do this for them. Cheryl Kearns Hills, residents of the town. Again, thanks to the board, administration, here at the CR community for working the opportunities. Mayday, mayday, alert, alert, urgent, urgent. This plea is simple. Help is needed by this board. It's May 1st, the Chancellor Center continues to age. Another fiscal year is almost finished, just toward the end of the Finance Committee. It's time to make the move and rectify the Chancellor Center issues by making the necessary repairs and needed changes to this building. As I attend these meetings, the cracks in the parking lot continue to grow, as I'm sure the cracks in the foundation do too. Please continue to move forward as this building continues to stand with more costly issues developing. And I thank you for asking the questions, asking for these estimates. Again, we work on the grants, and they're extremely laborious. There's many jumps and hurdles, ungodly hours. So again, thank you, and again, it's May Day, but I'm looking forward. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry, Tara Brenda McLaughlin, Newtown Borough resident. And I want to support Cheryl in her thanks for the hard work for the grant, because I know that's a lot of work. The last facilities meeting I came to was extremely long, and so and I don't know where you live, but that was like a long, I don't want to support Nikki in that it was asked for, so I don't want anybody to think Nikki was asking for the two pieces now, because she didn't think about it earlier, but as an audience member, I remember being asked for. But I'm not throwing you under the bus either, because I know there's a lot of information and it's was tough and it got really late. So thank you for doing that. I think all of us want to hear that too, so I appreciate it. And that's
Jim Green, Richboro. Just a question, how long will this last? So for the Chancellor Center, how long will this $18.4 million last? When will we have to redo $18.4 million?
Well, with any construction project, right, there's components that will last 30 years, there's components that will last 10 years, depending on what you're talking about. Every product has a different sustainability, period. So, depending on the floor finishes, they could be 10 years. You could have walls that are painted whenever the district decides, to repaint walls. The configuration will last as long as they want that configuration to last. This place was renovated in the early 2000s, I believe. And there will always be ongoing maintenance on the exterior of this building. Of course, it's a historic building. We know that there'll be repointing of stone, on a regular basis. We know that the roof systems are varying types and installation dates, so we have a record of when those respective roofs need to be replaced again, but that's a cyclical thing as well. There's slate on part of the building that's still fine. There's some replacement 50-year asphalt shingles that are going to last another 30 years. There's some flat membrane roof that we know needs to be replaced in the near future, regardless of what happens. Window systems were replaced with, new windows. They should be good for 15 years-ish, right? Depends on how often you use them. So really, it's a difficult question to answer. Holistically, HVAC systems today will last you 20 years. You know, the systems that were installed in 1950, you know, we're taking out boilers that were installed in 1950 because they were put together like battleships and they had asbestos gaskets and things in them that just didn't fail. But things aren't made the same anymore. So they just don't build them like they used to, as they say. But we will, you know, it really just varies. So, I mean, I think holistically you're looking at 20 to 25 years.
Perfect.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Ready to go next one?
On the new town, are we? Okay. Newtown, thank you guys. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Newtown Elementary School, I think in the packet that we prepared with Schrader and we've been looking at as an order of magnitude, it was in the 27 million range. And that number we're looking at before we get to the these escalations and all of those things. So the number here was developed by our team based on looking at Hillcrest, looking at Richboro, looking not only at the numbers that they were awarded at, because we took the low bids. There were high bids and there were low bids. So we take a look at the low bids, the high bids, and we develop an average square foot cost. And we look at that between the buildings that were recently bid, and we apply those to the project today to come up with what we think is a realistic number. Then we project it out, obviously, to the 2026 start. But we have the new construction at $300 a square foot, and that includes $150 for mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And the difference between this number and the number that you have in the master sheet that we had put together is this includes the same additions that we put on Hillcrest and Richboro. So the number that you had before is purely taking that building and renovating it. This is renovating and putting the additions on for equal comparison amongst those facilities. So there's another $1.7 million in this to address those additions. There's the 83,000 square foot of renovations. This one also includes a new roof. The roof is tired, so there's $3 million in roof replacement. This has an allowance for an entrance canopy because we did put a canopy on the last two. So we just assumed that they would be equal and put that in the project. And then we have a site allowance of $2.5 million. Playgrounds were replaced, we believe, so we did not put playgrounds in the project. And then we added what we believe would be the need for 16 modulars to renovate this building over 2 years, to take classrooms and move them out, renovate a section of the building, take the other half, move them out, and do the same. So this has the modular phasing in it, so you're looking at about $33.7 million. And then we apply the same 20% for fees, permits, inspections, utilities, furniture, fixture, and equipment, 5% design, and 5% construction contingencies. And you're looking at about $43.7 million total project cost. That's the difference between construction cost and total project cost. The number above the black line, the first horizontal black line at 33.7, that's called construction cost. That's what it costs to do the work. The number above the second horizontal black line, 43.7, is total project cost. That's all in. That's fees, contingencies, everyone involved to do the work, going through land development and such. Then we assume the 2026 start, so we put the 1 year of design, the construction duration of 2.4 years, years to the midpoint is 2.2, and we apply the 3 and 4% to get us in the range of 46.7 to 47.7 million to perform the work on this project. That's it in a nutshell. Are there any questions on Newtown?
Mr. Hickey?
Yeah, I'll ask one.
Yes.
We talked about, in the previous slide, we talked about à la carte. is there any à la carte options on this? For example, that's heavy renovations for 22.4 million. Is it possible to eliminate that? I'm just saying completely, there's something, maybe you could do light renovation, and let's just do the new entrance with the vestibule, the roofing upgrades, canopy, you know, and that kind of things to eliminate $22 million from this $43 million project.
I don't know if you get 22 million out of the 47, but look, there's variations to any one of these budgets we're presenting. We're just giving you, right? So if you said we don't want to put the canopy on, you could say, look, all I want to do is go in this building, replace the infrastructure. I don't want to do anything else to it. It's going to look like it looks. I'm going to make sure it has new vital organs inside. It's going to have a new heart. It's going to have all new circulatory stuff. It's going to have its HVAC. It's going to have its, domestic piping, all of those things. You're going to have some incidental things you have to address to replace that, casework where there's unit ventilators, right? So you can pare this down to any kind of project you want. Right now, this is assuming parity between what you did at Richboro, what you did at Hillcrest, and this would be the same, equal to those two.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason I for example, I've heard like numerous times that Newtown Elementary needs a roof.
Definitely needs a roof.
So, okay, I don't want to eliminate a roof because it's something that's not, like you said, I'll use your medical analogy there, so. But it is
It needs
possible.
the skin, right? Yeah, it needs the skin, if you will. So it has to have, that roof, I will say, is a membrane roof that was extended back when I was here with a coating to extend the life 10 years. Instead of replacing it, we said, all right, it's a candidate to extend it. It's a rubber roof, which is never the best on a school, especially elementary school. If stuff gets thrown up or whatever, it cuts the roof. Anyway, it is, it's well past the 10-year coating. In fact, the coating is almost not even there anymore. UV has destroyed it and it's blown some of it away. So the roof you couldn't not do. You could say we don't need the canopy. You could say we're not going to do all the things we did at the other building. And we could certainly, working with Jess and working with your team, come up with a different variation of this. But this is just what we were asked to do, is kind of look at these as parity between what the district's done in the past.
Oh, I agree, yeah, and like you said, this is what we actually did.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question, thanks, I appreciate it.
No, it's a fair question.
Mr. Pete?
Just a quick question and comment. Would you refresh my memory, Mr. Taylor? I think when we did one particular elementary school renovation, we chose for cost reasons not to do terrazzo.
Yes.
Yes, and then subsequently, we've gone ahead and done terrazzo in our renovations more recently, at least the last two buildings, because we realized terrazzo is a much smarter product to use.
There's only one project there that we did terrazzo at Rolling Hills and most of it. But then we got a little waylaid on one project with the terrazzo, and now so somebody asked a question. I'm sorry.
This building has significant amounts of terrazzo.
Right, so one of the things that won't need to be done in this building is the corridor floors will need to be clearly protected during the entire construction phase, and we won't have to do corridor floors. So will some costs come out of this because we don't have to do the floor? Yeah, so we'll save money by not doing a corridor floor. We can paint the walls, we leave the floor, we put new ceilings in. There's definitely, the ability to do variations. If the district wants to start going in a slightly different direction and not address the last two elementary schools the way that they have with the others, that's, something we can give you prices for as well. It really just comes down, whatever you want me to, do, I'll give you the pros and cons. Because the other thing we can do as we develop budgets down the road is give you kind of the considerations, right? Here's what you get, here's what you don't get. If you consider these other options. As we start to go down from this, I'd give you kind of a heat map or things that you would compromise or not have.
Right, you just sort of verified the point I was trying to make, which is, we could get into cherry picking, going down and knocking off certain items from a renovation project. But on the other hand, we've done that once before, and I don't think retrospectively it was a wise thing to do. And the other is the word parity. I mean, we've talked a lot about that, even down to the playground level, you know. This is the standard that we do for renovation projects, and, you know, it would be a significant change in direction for the board to decide to start trimming back, you know, on a certain project.
But I mean, I'm not driving the scope and right, so anything you want me to look at, I'm happy to look at, but I'm happy to give you the pros and cons with each one of those options that you've asked for.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Sure, so just to piggyback on what Mr. Tate was saying, the difference in these last two projects is you're renovating construction that was new 20, 25 years ago, third of the newer buildings. Well, like Newtown, it was done relatively, I mean, compare the renovation to Richboro to Newtown. Newtown is I mean, it hasn't been renovated since it was built.
It's 30, I think it's.
Yeah, it was like 92, I think.
Right, versus Richboro in the 60s, a lot of these other ones were a lot older.
Right,
so
it's like 30.
So I'm saying, it's not like you have to totally, like, I look at.
Welsh for sure, Joe.
I look at Welsh, and Newtown I have to go look at, okay? And Soul Finestone obviously was an old building. So they got some serious masterwork. But if you want to talk about parity, I can look at Churchville and know that their renovations were the first ones to be done. That wasn't a full, like, to Mr. Tate's point, it's not the renovations we're doing today. Doug knows, he was here, it's when he first came on board. But when I look at it, to me, I scratch my head when I say we're going to do a full renovation of Welsh, for sure. Newtown, I have to go look, because I think maybe I was just getting out of college when that was built, so it's not too long ago. I'm not that old. But anyway, it's going to be the original going on to something, so I think we can get away. I mean, there's a lot of things that might not be, that can be touched up more than replaced.
I think Newtown is one of those where the classrooms are appropriately sized, the corridors are wide enough. You really don't have to do as much partition, you know, reconfiguration in that building that you did in some of the others, for sure. You're not incorrect. Like, there's definitely things we don't have to do like we did in some of the other buildings. So that will help with some of these, you know, total costs, but like, it's all part of that programming stage. Right now, we're in that order of magnitude.
Gotcha.
This should absolutely come down to be something slightly different, you know, this is kind of, as I said, parity. So if you want to do something less, we can develop those.
I'm just giving you my feedback, thank you.
No, it's good feedback.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Thanks. Doug, just before we go further, could you delineate and provide a little bit further explanation? Mr. Hickey brought up an interesting point. As we go through and look at lines 1 and 2, there's descriptors like medium renovation or heavy renovation. I haven't looked through it all the way. I don't believe I found a light renovation yet, but could you provide a little bit more description to delineate the difference between heavy and medium renovation?
Yeah, I mean, generally our heavy renovation are those that are going to have all new MEP infrastructure, right, which we know these will. And we do assume that there's going to be partition modifications in those spaces, all new finishes. Light renovations are, you know, you're not really addressing the MEP stuff. You might just be doing, you know, stuff like Joe mentioned, you're just going to go in and do painting and maybe new floor finishes and some tack board, visual display boards, but not to the same extent that you would if you're on the other end of that. So,
what about medium?
Medium is, it's kind of in the middle of those two, right? So you might be putting some new partitions in, but not tearing a bunch of partitions out. Like, there's new, taking a space and building new office spaces within the space, or, you know, if you, let's say you took a multi-purpose room and said we want to add classrooms to it, you know, that's something that's kind of, you're not tearing down, you're building new metal stud walls and putting drywall up.
And you're not doing HVAC boiler issues?
You're still doing HVAC within the medium space.
HVAC, but just not
You're not tearing, you're not
As much
doing as much
partitions.
demolition and reconfiguration. I can get you something that kind of outlines what they are, so that you have it for future.
Just on the order of magnitude level, since that's where we're at, it's fine. I just thought that it would be interesting to discuss, because Maureen M. Welsh you've got as medium, but Newtown you have as heavy.
Right.
So.
Because Welsh, as I said, is definitely not, Welsh is, I think, a building that functions, I don't love the design personally, but I think the building functions like a school needs to function. The hallways are appropriately sized, the classrooms, the spaces. I don't think there's going to be any additions or major renovations. That's one that's going to be more of, finishes and infrastructure. The exterior is not in poor condition. We know we replaced the cast stone years ago. This brick veneer is good. It needs a new roof, probably new windows by the time we get to it. Otherwise, pretty good. That already has a bus canopy that needs to be repainted and so.
I think the major thing there is electrical there.
Electrical's definitely, so all the MEP would be replaced, mechanical, electrical, plumbing would all be replaced.
That's it, Welch.
Welsh, we'll get to Welsh.
Yeah. Welsh is next.
Actually, you can go, is that what's next?
Well, I have some other questions on
Oh, I'm
Newtown.
sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Osecki.
I'm interested because this is a 10 classroom addition, this number one.
No.
What is number one?
Number one is basically added, so this is parity with what happened at Richboro and Hillcrest. And what that is all three of those floor plans were the same. The front office space, the configuration of the front office space is not great.
Okay.
When you walk into the front door, there's a classroom that is in the lobby of the building. There are office spaces that just aren't appropriately sized. It moves the principal to a space where they can observe what's happening in the front of the building. So there's office space reconfigurations at the front. There's a little expansion there. The boiler room space and receiving isn't sufficient at the side of the building. So this adds a small loading dock area, kind of storage space in that area behind the kitchen. There's some kitchen renovation that pushes into that, so that when the kitchen grows a bit to provide a more appropriately sized kitchen prep area, it takes some of that space in the back, and that's why we put some of that addition on the side. I think that those are the two areas that get the square footage. It's minimal square footage, but it is enough that it does add, $2 million to the project.
So what she's asking is, on one of the many sheets that we've reviewed, there was an option, put an addition to eliminate some overcrowding, but in the previous
No,
meeting, we
that's not
discussed
this.
that was gonna make the elementary school way too large.
big. I
Yeah, so
remember.
that is not on here. These are two small additions.
Right. The other thing to note about Newtown, while the footprint is the same as Hillcrest and Richboro, the year after Newtown was built, 1 year later, they added 10 classrooms to it.
So the
So-
current footprint is the same.
It already
as
has
the
a 10
renovated
classroom
footprint.
addition from when it was built. So that one doesn't require the 10 classroom addition because they're there already.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Stone?
Yeah, I was going to ask a more general question. Have we come to an agreement that we're going to move forward with with Newtown Elementary School and Margaret Welsh as the next two projects that we're going to work on? We haven't agreed on anything. Should we get to that point?
No,
And then we can pare down.
no. Because this is what we're doing. This is the master plan. This is the whole idea. If you want to chop this up and go piece by piece, we discussed this before, you're just not going to get as good as a result. You're going to have community that are going to be upset, and you're going to have projects that are unresolved and untalked about or haven't completed the discussion as we're doing right now. We're moving in that direction, but not to try to take pieces out. Personally, as one of 9, and as an architect that's gone through this, I think that's a bad idea. Clearly, there can be 5 of you that can say I'm wrong, but.
I think she was just asking a valid question. I don't know why you interrupted her.
Oh, I'm okay, we haven't, I think what my question is, you know, I see all these things here. Are we going to just keep talking about breaking this down piece by piece by piece for the next month or 2 months, and then talk, and then say, well, we're not going to do Newtown Elementary School. Let's look at Holland Middle School, or that's kind of what I'm saying. Or, you know, can we look at the big picture and say, look, we got to get moving, and the next 2 projects or 3 projects should be these 3. And then we'll hone down based on what we can afford, because the bottom line is what's this going to cost? Then we can talk about things like parity, how much parity is involved. And I'm thinking more, you know, this big picture is let's make some decisions on some of these schools, because like we're still sitting here not knowing what we're doing with Chancellor.
Questions.
And, you know,
So I think you're.
and it'll be another 3 months before we get everything. And then we lose another school year. That's why I'm trying to, you know, figure out if we can come to some general conclusions and then work those details the way we want them, to get them down to the numbers that we need to. And I know the Chancellor was an important one, because that warm, safe, and dry number, I think we were all expecting to get those. Many of us were expecting those tonight. I was kind of expecting to see that tonight, so we could put that into perspective with these others, which is great. But I think the bottom line is $1.
I'll definitely go back to the warm, safe, dry. I think you're in that 7.7 million range plus the escalation, but I'll fully define that. But it's not far from that. It's probably going to be the 8 or 9 million-ish range by the time you get, you know, to where we are. But I apologize that you guys were looking for that. I did not realize that. So I will put that together.
And my point was more conversational. I don't believe, upon reflection, and I'm glad, Mrs. Stone, you concurred, that this wasn't intended to be an interruption to be dismissive. There's been many meetings that we've had that have been conversational, and there's been many opportunities where a board member has interrupted another. So the point here is that we're not trying to escalate that. I was trying to be conversational with Ms. Stone to respond to pulling something out, because we've had that discussion in the past.
Yeah, and I see where you.
But to fully answer your question, yes, I agree that that's where we're going with this. But I personally don't think it's a good idea at this point to be pulling some things out without looking at others. I think that we are in the spot where we are narrowing down to a certain set of projects that the board is considering, getting more detail on to decide, is this something that should be included or excluded? But
Can we also participate in this conversation, because, I mean, we also, I think Mr. Hidalgo wants to speak, I want to speak, it's the exact same topic, so, I mean.
So, I mean, I admire Ms. Stone's desire to move quickly with some of these things, but I'll say this, forget everything else and just look at these 3 projects we're talking about. The time span is probably 6 years, right?
I'm going to go over the time span.
Right, so we're not there yet, but the bottom line is, a lot of these projects we're talking about now is going to be decided by a future board. So ultimately, when we got, I mean, you can vote for whatever you want now, but the thing is, there's going to be time in between. If we declare we're going to pick these 3 schools and we're going to do them, in between the time that is, a new board's going to come in and might find a new direction, might want to revisit this capital endeavor that we're doing, this capital assessment. because that's the reason we did this in the first place, was to try to look at all these moving parts. We're not even talking about enrollment in these meetings. This is how big and grand a scale, and it deserves the time and attention we're putting into it. I mean, we're getting, regardless of what anybody thinks, we're getting very close to understanding what we're gonna do with this building, and there's a few options. You may end up keeping it as administrative building, but no matter what, we do need, I think we owe the obligation to repair this building, at least for the warm, safe, and dry, regardless of what that might mean, that even the administration might not be here in 5 years. We still have to take care of this building. There's unresolved potential funding coming from what Dr. Senko was speaking about later. So that all has to work into this. So we can, as I said, we can sit here and say we're gonna do these 3 projects today, but November, there's a new board, and who knows what the direction that's going to be. So we're not gonna get this all solved if we just say, we're deciding on this and let's move it, because we haven't talked about the stadiums, we haven't talked about the other smaller properties, and most importantly, we haven't really talked about what's gonna fix our enrollment in the middle schools, which is why we did this whole thing. But this is gonna be a very long process. It's not gonna be something we can just do overnight. I think we're making good progress. Just gotta keep chugging ahead. But I appreciate what Ms. Stone said.
So I understand Linda's desire to make a decision and move forward. I mean, I kind of feel that we have to at some point, but also I share Mike's perspective that, hey, this is the master plan. We have to take our time and really discuss everything and plan out. I do think that by picking these 4 whatever projects to dig into a little bit further, we kind of prioritize in some ways, but without getting into too much detail, except maybe the Chancellor Center, because we feel that we have to make a decision sooner than later. So, yes, we prioritize. Does it mean that we're going to vote for all this? I don't know. I mean, we are not there yet. But I think these are really good discussions, very good points from everybody. And I mean, for me, the parity part is very important, because we cannot do things with certain standards, and all of a sudden we decide to, make a school or two very, very lower standards or different. So we have to keep the same standard. So I think I agree with all of you. I mean, we all sort of we are at the same table trying to figure out what we're doing, and we really don't know yet, but we're doing the right things by talking about it.
So what I was what I was gonna offer, because I know there's question of, we don't know how much this is gonna cost, and so one of the things Tony needs to start to get numbers together and work with the financial team is understanding what these costs are over X number of years, when the design starts, when the construction starts, so they can begin to kind of assess what those costs are. So this is starting to set up that structure to allow Tony, and his team to do that. So we'll, when I get to the Gantt chart, if I get to the Gantt chart, I'll show you what it, at least to give you some idea of how this shakes out with the gross assumption that there'd be some decision to move forward, in June, because we had to pick a date of something to establish timelines with. So we're working toward that slide. That's the last slide.
Can I just make one quick comment? It's sort of a two-parter. One is, I agree with everything that everybody said to a point. We are having a really healthy discussion about this. I think we've heard about the reason why, for example, Maureen Welsh and Newtown Elementary are higher priorities than other projects, because there's a detailed matrix that says, do you renovate, do you continue to do repairs, so forth and so on. So I think we have a good rationale. we have delayed a decision on Chancellor for 2 years now, and I think that's one that I don't think we should delay further. And the last thing that I'll point out is, if you look on this slide, lines 17, 18, 19, 20, when you're looking at necessary renovation projects, every year you delay adds costs. And it's a tough decision to look at spending tens of millions of dollars on a project. No, we've been doing that for a long time. And any board can turn around and reverse the decision a year later. I haven't seen that happen personally, but that's always a possibility. But, you know, I do think we have a responsibility to make difficult decisions, and, you know, delaying is not always the wisest thing to do.
Ms. Khan, do you have any questions?
I'm okay right now. Thank you.
Okay. And I also want to see, the other thing we did add was Holland Middle School. So that was something we do have to contribute, and that comes into tonight, that we are going to be, he's going to tell us kind of where we're at for that. So that's also important with our enrollment and where we are with our middle schools as far as the size.
Yes. The next one is Maureen Welsh. Okay. So to Joe's point, this building, because of its age, because of its configuration, because it's appropriately sized, and from a code perspective, a lot of it is more current than some of the other buildings. This has no new construction. There's no additions included as a part of this. This is more at the medium renovation category than major renovation. Minimal programming changes. So we're not doing a lot of reworking partitions in this building. And it does include new exterior windows throughout, because that's the one component of the building that hasn't been replaced. And they are, over the years, we've continued to replace challenged windows in there, but not fully replaced. We just repaired. So that's why this one is coming in at $250 a square foot at the $24.2 million. Unfortunately, this building also needs a roof. This was another roof that was coated that needs to be replaced. There is no entrance canopy included because it already has one. We put in a minimal amount for site work, which might be, a contractor staging area, restoration of where they work, some minimal site changes. I don't know that it would be $1 million, but we wanted to make sure that we were covering that, maybe some site lighting upgrades, some new lights around the site. So it's a minimal site allowance. There playgrounds we didn't include because of your playground project, and we had to include the phasing for the 16 modular classrooms, because again, we're going to have kids in this building when we renovate, so they'll be shifting the kids around as we go through this project. So that brings you to the 32.5, and then again, the 20% for permits, fees, inspections, furniture, fixture, equipment, utilities, soft costs, and then 5% for design and 5% for construction contingencies. Again, this would be pushed out till 2028, so we're looking at 3 years until we actually perform the work on this project, assuming a 1-year design duration, but not starting until 27 with the design duration. A 2.4-year construction, and then we look at the 3% and 4%. So it takes it to the 47.9 to 49.9 cost range for this project starting in 2028. So it is less expensive to perform than the other, but the extension of 2 years puts it at a similar cost as Newtown L. But if you look at it today's number, it's it's less. But that's any of these are going to be subject to that 3 to 4%, and that's assuming that the climate stays the way it is right now. You can't predict.
Nice and calm.
What's just calm and nice. That's what we want. So that's Welsh Elementary. Again, less expensive to address than the other schools. Any questions on Welsh? Holland. So Holland Middle School is not as easy to look at, even at this phase, because we haven't had any program, and we know that we need to add classrooms to this. We know that we need to expand the cafeteria. So this is limited to just the classroom addition and to the cafeteria. So it includes a cafeteria expansion of 6,000 square feet. And again, this is absent drawings from Schrader. This is us just projecting based on, what we think it needs to be at this very early stage. This would extend the cafeteria toward that parking lot area where the bus entry is, where the old entry to that building is between Hillcrest and Holland. Some parking lot, configuration work there as a part of that. And then a 6th classroom addition. And I kind of look, when I look at the plan, we just put it in that area of the, where the chillers are in the back corner of the back, and there's a grass area. It faces the fields looking down the hill, kind of in that corner, to seem like an appropriate place to try to make those classrooms work. That you can't grow this all out into your parking lot, or buses will never function in there again. So, and renovating some of the building interior to expand that cafeteria toward that new addition that would be the cafeteria. So that it does have heavy renovations because it's an entirely new piece of construction in the building to make the cafeteria extend to that exterior. Fortunately, we have no roof work here. The entrance canopy was taken care of with the project. The site work, we put in an allowance of $1 million, no playground work. And we put some phasing in this. These are temporary partitions, indoor air quality, making sure we have negative air pressure in the area they work. We put $300,000 in to address just temporary partitions and phasing around those additions that would happen. We have the typical 20%, 5 and 5, so that's the 30% on the bottom. So this is looking at around a $12.3 million project, projected to 2027, looks like 13.3 to 13.7. It's limited to just those two areas, nothing else. But we did carry, a more significant unit cost at $550 a square foot and $450 a square foot because of the nature of those two smaller additions on a project. You don't realize the efficiencies you do in a total renovation project at $300 a square foot. So I wish David were here to help with any programming questions you might have, but it's just assumptions based on those sizes. I think it's a good number,
I do have a question for Dr. Sanko. 6 classrooms, as we're looking at enrollment, do we know where we are with our middle schools? Conservatively, 6 classrooms is enough. 6 classrooms is enough that we could have something else could come in there.
So we assume 150, right? That's kitchen.
Yeah. So currently, the enrollment as of today at Holland Middle is 962, and at Newtown Middle it's 833. But a team is approximately 140 or 150.
If I remember correctly, that's approximately what, when we were looking at the Cropper projections, it was around that number as well.
And that's
why we used
the 6 classroom. That's where you came up with the 6 classrooms, is what the proper numbers going into funneling in from elementary schools on the south side to go into that middle school would sustain to be able to have what's projected for a larger capacity.
Yeah, so
this is all premised on moving to a 6, 7, 8.
Or this stays
No.
at 7 and 8.
This stays the same.
Yes.
We're just, this
It's
is,
just the increase in enrollment
Okay.
that we see that Copper is projected.
okay.
I guess, just a discussion point as we talk about that increased enrollment, and given that there's already a crowding problem here, I see that you have this starting in 2027. You know, we may want to look at moving some things around because, you know, this is where there really is a crunch now, and kids are feeling it now as opposed to like maybe at Newtown Elementary or Welch.
Yeah,
So we did look at that.
we talked about that, right?
Yeah, so what we did is when we met, I don't know, whenever we met, after the last meeting, we took the Cropper report and made sure that when it hit that number that we needed to have that expansion done by, that's when we made the end date to this. So we purposely fit, because this project's different than everything else, so we shifted it around, and when
We backed into it. The completion date is when you would have that influx of students.
So
So-
you'll see in a couple more slides, you'll see.
I'll show you
It's kind
how.
of like a Tetris part where we fit it in where we needed it.
Okay, thank you.
It is very, I was gonna do a Gantt chart and it just gets so complicated. I thought it was better to just do it on a,
What you did was how my brain works.
yeah.
Mr. Rosero?
Thanks, Doug. We've got heavy renovations on line 3. Before we discussed heavy includes partition realignment. Does that, in this case, make some of these tight court hallways in Holland Middle wider to be more comparable and on a parity with Newtown Middle?
No, this is only associated with the cafeteria expansion. This is recognizing that you're gonna probably, where that entrance is from the side lot where the buses are, is reconfiguring that, and extending it into the addition of the cafeteria to kind of have that cafeteria within the same proximity as what's there. So we know that that's gonna be, you know, a more serious renovation project and
So some of the hallways that are tight are going to still stay tight.
yeah, it
We're
doesn't,
not touching anything else except for the cafeteria and those six classes. So every other space will remain untouched.
Untouched.
yep, this is isolated to just those two things.
So, coming back to that delineation explanation between medium and heavy, should this be heavy or should it be medium?
Yeah, this is definitely heavy, because this is basically taking a space that's a vestibule and a couple little office spaces, I think, off to the side,
Yeah.
and converting that and extending that cafeteria space toward the exterior, and then adding the exterior piece on. So this is the existing building that connects the cafeteria to what would be the new cafeteria extension.
Right, but isn't that number 1? New building,
That's just the new
construct
addition.
cafeteria expansion.
So that's putting the new addition on the outside. And then you have the cafeteria inside, and you have to connect those. This is the connecting. This is taking that cafeteria and connecting it to that exterior component.
That answer actually helps me understand the difference between medium and heavy a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Taylor, I guess in regards to the Holland Middle School, I think you already spoke about this last time, but during this time of construction, so it would not disrupt the current, if there were the students during the school year, during that 1.5 years, since it's kind of an addition to the current cafeteria and the addition of the 6 classroom wing addition.
I missed the
Would the
question.
construction interrupt the normal flow of the school day?
We'll obviously work around, you know, the school activities. You know, the additions obviously can be constructed around that. We're gonna have to work we're gonna have to work closely with the principal and develop a phasing plan so that we don't interrupt the daily activities at the school.
And specifically around the cafeteria.
Specifically around, so the cafeteria work would be limited to a summer phase. We would work that into a summer phase. We can get the addition on, we can get the classrooms on, and then those connections and final pieces we can do over the summer months. I have that kind of in the Gantt schedule.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Finkel, for clarifying this problem. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, yeah, sure.
Anyone else?
The next two are easy. Like, I mean, these are stadium budgets that, this is taking the stadium that is, we consider phase one, where we put the turf in, put the rough-ins for future concession stands, team rooms, toilet rooms. We allowed space for the future bleachers to happen, and we also included the drive that would continue along the side of the stadium and tie into Holland Road with a gated, controlled traffic, intersection there, so that it wouldn't be used on a daily basis. There was, back when the project was approved, they penned out approval for that. I don't know where that would stand at this point, but that would be a whole nother piece that we'd have to look into. So this basically, the first budget that you see here is the full scope, and then I have a second budget to limit this to something that might be more affordable, considering everything that the district's trying to do at one time. So the aluminum bleachers are in here. That's 3,000 seats. There's a press box. There are ticket booths assumed in here. There's 2 ticket booths. It's been designed for 2 locations off the 2 different parking areas. There's a field house with toilet rooms, a field house with team rooms, a field house that includes concession stands. They're all part of 2 different buildings. Food service equipment would be included that is required for the concessions. We know where utilities live, so we're able to, kind of come up with where we're connecting into sanitary, where we're connecting to water. Electric communications is all in here. Earthwork is assumed for those field houses, bleachers, sidewalks, fencing repairs, and then a separate line item to complete that internal drive connection to the Holland Road exit is included. And then there's a subtotal. This is because this was a budget that we had prepared a while back. This budget is prepared slightly different than the others that you saw. We had shown the 10% general conditions for the contractor in here and the 5% design contingency that brings it to your hard cost. Then we had the 25% fees and contingency at the bottom, since we had the 5% at the top. But we still have 30%. It's just factored slightly differently. So you're looking at $6.9 or $7 million to start the construction in '27. It increases it to $7.4 to $7.6 billion to address all of that work to complete the stadium. Now there is a second budget that provides cost control for this as well. And that, if you look at the green areas, one is to take some alternates, where you would say we could make the press box an alternate. I'm not suggesting that you don't want the press box. I'm just trying to find ways for you to consider cost control. You could remove about $400,000 if you took that off or made it a separate component. The field house team rooms, if you didn't put the team rooms on, you could probably reduce the cost by about $900,000. If you didn't put the concessions on with the food service equipment, it's about $560,000. So suddenly, you can bring your number down closer to 4.3 and a total project cost of 4.6 to 4.7. It gets you the bleachers and some of those. You don't have to take all of those. If you wanted to make it $5 million or something, you can still do part of the team room or a concession stand. There are some toilet rooms. We have to look at the code component of that as well, right? If the building is within a certain distance from the stadium, by code, you're permitted to use some of those toilet rooms. From a functionality and operation standpoint, do you really want to do that is another question. We do know that there are some toilet rooms off the women's toilet rooms that were, there's a separate door. There's toilet rooms offered to the students within the building. If you open a door, there's another whole set of toilet rooms that have kind of been entombed that aren't really used, that you could probably open to the exterior with some modifications and provide access to some toilet rooms from outside as well. That might reduce the number that we would put at the stadium. So there's some things to consider here, but I'm just trying to show you a way to possibly control the cost of this. So those are the budgets that we prepared. Yes.
The items that you removed from the reduced scope, if we wanted to add them on at a later date, could you do that and add them on piecemeal?
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's going to cost you, each module you build later is going to cost you more than it would have if you built it when we did it.
Sure, I understand. I just want to make sure that it is indeed an option as, for example, you could have naming rights to our press box and somebody might be willing to put up $400K to have their name put on it. And then the only other comment I have is everybody mentions this and I don't necessarily agree with what I'm going to say, but everybody talks about parity. So if you're talking about parity, this is the biggest parity item and probably the longest standing parity item in our district, other than a pool of which I'm not going to ask for or request.
Right now.
Right.
No, I'm not going to ask for a pool.
You just said it. But so that's why, the budget, the second budget, at least provides you with some perhaps opportunity to get closer to that parity by taking the number down. We would design the entire, we have in the master plan, we've kind of designed these spaces already. You could also possibly reduce these. He assumed these masonry, veneer, partitions. I want to say it's at Pensbury or Neshaminy?
Neshaminy.
Where we've used
Neshaminy.
prefabricated, concrete prefabricated.
I think both.
I know Pensbury for sure.
Neshaminy they just approved it
Yeah,
not too long ago.
I don't think we're doing Neshaminy though.
No.
Pensbury we did.
Yes.
And so we worked with a company that does, basically you can give them the design and they will develop these designs, bring them out in the truck, set them down, and it's a matter of putting, some exterior pieces together. But it does minimize the cost. It's non-prevailing wage because it's fabricated off-site. And they have different stamped patterns and you can do color and they fit in well. I mean, they are utilitarian type structures anyway. So it gives you, so these numbers assume traditional, but we would develop alternates as part of the project and bid it that way. And if an alternate didn't happen, obviously it would have to feel finished. So it would allow you to do what you're saying, come in later and put those other pieces in.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, speaking about parity again, aluminum bleachers for 3,000 people. Aluminum bleachers are really, really loud, especially when 3,000 people are climbing into their seats. What are the cost comparisons for other than aluminum seating? Aluminum bleachers, I'm envisioning just that. Board bleachers that rise and it's a structure that sits out in the field, as opposed to a seating arrangement that's part of a stadium.
This is what you'll see at probably every stadium you'll visit that's constructed today. These are aluminum bleacher systems that are, there's footings, there's aluminum structure that goes in place, and then these are actually, there's a ADA ramp section, there's ADA assisted seating areas, and they are seats with risers. It's not, you're not dropping things through. These are solid-looking bleacher systems with railings and fencing to protect from fall, 42-inch height. So they're substantial bleacher systems that you would see. I mean, it's like if you went to Dover Downs Speedway and looked at all the bleachers around that track, that's what's there, essentially.
Right, so this isn't where the cell phone or a drink can go.
No, this
through
isn't
it.
like the set you would put like in the grass
Right.
for, 30 people. This is a substantial structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I will be sure, if we got the schedule yet. So, the schedule is based upon what we discussed at the last meeting on when we said, hey, let's take a look at when we would do these projects, and also to help Tony in terms of how this would, what the borrowing would look like. Is this affordable or not? We still have a lot of questions to answer, right? So this starts to formulate that. We can take the cost that we've looked at. We can start to look at what the professional fees are versus construction. Obviously, when you start a project, you don't need the money for the construction. You need the money for the design team to put the design together and bid the job. It's not until you actually award the project that you need the bigger chunk of money to actually start performing the work. And even then, it's drawn. It's not all paid out over one payment period. So this schedule called a Gantt schedule is basically, or a Gantt chart, is basically number one at the very top of the sheet is assuming that the board would approve this project for the sake of this in June. You're saying, okay, Schrader Group and CHA, let's get moving, let's get started. Let's sit down with our team, start programming, let's get ready to go into submissions into the township, go to land development, and document your projects. So
I just want to interrupt, I'm sorry, real quick, Doug. We had to pick a start date to build this from. So we're not indicating that June we're going to be moving on anything. We just had to pick a start date to build from there.
we did, right. So if this moves several months, then these projects start to push out and the escalation changes the cost of the project. So the numbers won't necessarily look like the numbers that you see today if we continue to push back beyond and we lose. It's really critical in these projects that we capture 2 summers, right? We need to get summer 2 chances to get into these buildings and do those things that would affect teaching and learning. We can't do all of this stuff when kids are there. So it's really important that we take advantage of that. So the first one is Newtown Elementary School, and assuming that a July start of design takes you to July of 2006. But this project also requires not only the bidding, which would then happen from, so in April and May of 2006, we would want to start looking at bidding modulars, and those gray boxes are modulars, because we have to get the modular campus on track before you start construction of the rest of the project. So while you're documenting, you're also looking at bidding and getting bids for the modular project and getting the modulars on site. Then the 3Bs beneath the modulars are the bidding for the larger, the larger project, which is July, August, September, July, August. And then we're looking at construction of 24 months. So starting in September of 26, going through August of 28, those 2 years to construct that project. We said 2.4, it's basically the 2 years to do the building plus the 4 months of the modulars. That's kind of where I get the 2.4, even though they might overlap a bit. So that's how the Newtown Elementary School project works. Now they all have these horizontal bars, but I think what this helps you start to see is how things stack as well. Right, because now you know for Chancellor Center, you're starting that around the same time, just working to a start date of construction of September of '26, and that pushes out into October of '27. The V there is another owner activity that's vacating the building. There's a month to vacate the building. There's bidding, and while we're bidding, you could vacate the building, and then when the contractors are ready to go, you're out and they can get started with construction. So there's 12 months of design, 3 months of bidding, 1 month to vacate, and 14 months of construction. But you can see the design phase stacks for those two projects, right, while we're working on those two together. And the construction obviously happens at the same time. And then if you want to look at Holland, middle school cafeteria classroom addition and renovation, again, to meet that August of '28 date so that when we see the influx of students coming in, to get to that, we have to work backwards, right? So we actually have to start designing that around December of '25. 12 months of design. When I say design, that's submissions to the township. That could be, depending on how big the project is, you know, your conservation district approval. The conservation district is always the critical path on these because it's at least 9 months, sometimes 12, to get that final approval. You can't move forward with construction until you have that approval in hand. Nor would we ever want to move forward without that, because if something comes at you after you've awarded the job, you're inviting the contractor to give you a really nice change order at their discretion because you increased the scope from something that wasn't finally approved before you started. So we're not going to give anyone that opportunity. So Holland Middle School basically would start, as I said, in December of '25, go out 12 months. Bidding in, what is that, December of '26, and then moving into '27 for construction, finishing in '28. 18 months, we're looking at that as an 18-month construction project with the additions and the connection. But you can see that we get you know, the summer months at the end to make that connection and make it all happen. So the South Stadium, that was thrown in here to be completed in the fall of '27. Right? So around June or July, we would get started in that in '27, and it would be about a 6-month process to do that work. So that's the timing on that. That would require design to start somewhere around March of '26. So you can start to see, you know, where all these critical path start dates are for design phases moving forward as you make decisions, you know. And any of these things where, you know, we start to push back and push these projects back a year, you know, because we just can't get started. One, you can't really start footings in the middle of winter. You know, it's a hard time to tell a contractor to start. And you need to make sure you have the summer months that we need. So, and then Welsh Elementary School was the last one that we talked about doing, primarily because it's not as in bad a shape as Newtown Elementary School. So Newtown, in my opinion, would be first before you would tackle Welsh. And Welsh pushes pretty far out into '29. That's basically a design phase that starts in '26, the end of '26 or the beginning of '27, 12 months. Then you're going to have the bid phase for the larger project, the renovations, but you're also going to stack that with the bid phase for the modulars because you need modulars there. So there's 4 gray boxes are getting the modulars and submittals, getting the site ready, putting the modulars in, making the connections, all of the life safety issues that are associated with them. They have to be constructed and put together just like they're a functioning part of the building. If the alarm is pulled in the building, the alarm has to be going off in those buildings as well. So they're not treated as secondary structures. And I'm sure we've worked together to develop safe pathways that are protected for students between the building and those modulars for security purposes as well. So that starts to give you some idea as you look at the green Cs for construction, how the construction activities are stacking on top of each other throughout the district, and the respective start of design phases for the project. And again, very preliminary. based upon what we discussed last meeting, but this can be moved around any way you need. So, any questions on that? Is it helpful? A little bit?
Yeah, very.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Rapp. If you used this timeline and the projected budget numbers, maybe pick the smaller number for South and the 8 million for Chancellor, can we financially budget based on, I don't mean for you to answer it now, but based on this timeline, are we able to manage those projects?
I will
That's
say,
what I mean.
Doug knows this, that we need more information before we can answer that. We need to know when we should, how much we should be expecting to spend every year. I would assume that we would want to do this similarly to how we did our last set of projects, where we borrowed enough in that year for that, for the cost of that year. That way we're putting extra money away to smooth out any time that we exceed the debt service for that year. So we're still working to get to the point where we have that answer. I believe Doug said that before.
Yeah, so what we would do when we have some ideas to where this wants to be, I know PFM isn't going to want to do too many iterations of this, and I don't mind doing iterations for you guys to help us get to where this wants to be. What we do is put together a draw schedule, which is, it gives Tony the ability to share that with PFM, and it shows how much money will be drawn each month through design phase, and then how much money will be drawn each month through construction phase. And generally, the design phase, you can break up pretty evenly across it, assuming you look at the soft costs and we'll say, okay, from that soft cost, the architect's fees are more major during that phase. Our fees are minimal because we're just bird dogging it. We're watching budgets, we're watching schedules, we're making sure everybody's accountable, getting the approvals. But then you move into construction, and then our cost, because we're there full-time observing, is greater at that phase. The architects is less because they're just coming out and answering questions and addressing some of the things that happen. And then the contractors for the first several months are drawing heavy because they're ordering all their products, they're getting materials in line. Then it starts to kind of even out a little bit till you get to the end. So we would help put those kind of numbers together, so then Tony takes that and works with PFM for each one of these projects. So it's a lot of work to do depending on how many scenarios we want to do. So whenever we need to do it, we're ready to help.
Any other questions?
What I have for the next meeting is the Warm Safe Drive full option,
Got it.
and then a purchase price budget for a building.
In the legal question.
I would say that again, all the Act 34 applies to new construction, not to purchase of existing buildings. However, any building that you would want to purchase for a school district purpose would need to be approved by the PDE. So there's that.
Is there anything else that I missed for the next meeting? Just those three
Well,
items.
next meeting, I'm going to make sure that I have
Warm Safe and Drive for Chancellor.
Warm Safe and Drive, and also addressing anything that we assume needs to be for Warm Safe and Dry, and anything that might impact while we're doing that, what we have to, the domino piece a little bit. Okay.
Thanks, Doug.
Yep, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
See you, Doug.
Take care.
Go Vols.
Texas.
Just buy one.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what they do
Buy
now.
one, yeah.
I think Jess, you have handout,
Any
any
other
extra?
next- I'm sorry?
Any extra handout?
Uh,
I think I wrote it in mine.
They found one.
You have one?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
You're welcome, have a nice weekend.
You too, enjoy the weekend.
It's almost here.
Okay, we're going to move on to the facilities items that we typically would have done in the beginning of the meeting. So the first item is the full-day kindergarten discussion. This slide is a copy of the exact slide that when we first started talking about full-day kindergarten. It shows the total at the bottom of 17 additional classrooms needed for the full-day kindergarten projections. So when I go to the next slide, you guys will just remember that we're projecting the 17 classrooms based on the first grade enrollments. So the next item is the full-day kindergarten furniture. So the reason why I'm bringing this to you guys now is because we have to order furniture now in order to get it in August. So standard kindergarten classroom furniture was developed through input from teachers. Nakia from Hillcrest took the lead on this item. She did a phenomenal job. She met with teachers and discussed like what their idea of the ideal kindergarten is. That furniture includes round tables and chairs for the students, kidney tables, teacher and TA desks and chairs, classroom carpets, bookshelves, and teacher reading chairs. Each classroom then at each of the 10 elementary schools was reviewed by Nicole Crawford, the school principal, and myself to review condition of existing furniture. So we included any, if we had a kidney table that was beyond useful life, we included that in the purchase of the new furniture. We had very, very little amounts of that. So most of the furniture that we've had to order is for the increase in classrooms. If additional classrooms were needed, all furniture was ordered. If existing classrooms needed items, those items were ordered. Those items were priced. So Hillcrest and Richboro Elementaries were used as the basis of design since those classrooms were just renovated within the last few years. So the price for WB Mason, who supplies majority of the material, they were formerly Pemco, who provided the furniture for Hillcrest, Richboro, and Sulfinestone. So it's an additional cost of $175,073.40. This is CoStar's pricing. This is the same pricing that we used for all three of those elementary schools. And then Lakeshore Learning Materials, the cost of $21,802.50. Again, it's CoStar's pricing. WB Mason will be providing most of the furniture. Lakeshore will be providing, there's like an easel type thing for a learning book. Very, like the two, and then there's another easel for like art class. So those are very specific classroom educational type furniture.
Just may I add something about full-day kindergarten?
Absolutely.
Just mentioned that we built the model off of a longitudinal look at first grade enrollment. And I just want to repeat what I said before. That demonstrated approximately a 202 student increase from our average kindergarten enrollment, which would in total take us to approximately 700 students. Currently, this year, as of today, in our half-day program, we have 472 kindergarten students. The board received an email from me today. We currently have 463 students registered for full-day kindergarten, and there are an additional 47 families who began the registration for full-day kindergarten. And at this, when that 47 completes, if they all completed it today, we would be at 510. So we're seeing that trajectory move up. So whether we get to that full 700 or not on what we projected, I just wanted to give the board and the community an update where we are with that, since Jess brought up and discussed full-day kindergarten.
Okay, next item, rejection of wood, gym, and other floor maintenance service bid number 2521. I'm sorry, was there any questions on the, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I jumped ahead, my bad.
No, I just was wondering, when we first talked about this, is this within the budget that we talked about for furniture? Because we talked about furnishing kindergarten costumes, is that within?
We more talked about the fact that this would be taken out of the educational initiatives fund balance, not out of current year revenues. So this is one of those things that, I think it's pretty close to where we were, but we didn't actually put in a budget.
I remember that, but I'm just more curious about, like, is this what we expected to spend?
Yeah, I don't think this is excessive at all, or not as expensive as we thought either. I don't think it's that. So I think we're right around where we expected to be.
Any other questions?
Now we'll go to the next item. Rejection of wood, gym, and other floor maintenance services bid 2521. We received 2 bids on Thursday, April 3rd. These bids did not cover the entire scope of work. The scope of work was revised and work was rebid. So we are recommending the rejection of both bids for this project, for this particular bid. My next slide will be the rebid. Any questions on this one? Okay. Next one is the wood gym and other floor maintenance service bid 2532. So we went from 21 to 32. On this one, we received 3 bids on Thursday, April 24th. The scope of work includes screen, fixed lines, and recoat gymnasium and auditorium wood floors at 10 schools. The only floor that will be refinished is at Churchville, the art room classroom. That we have a wood floor in there that's pretty beat up, just from general wear and tear from art. So we are gonna refinish that one. The rest of the floors, when we did a reevaluation, we think we can safely hold off until next year with the recoating that we have in this bid. So work is to be complete during the summer of 2025, and the schedule is coordinated with summer activities. This is a 1-year agreement. Again, we keep redoing this every year because we reevaluate the floors and put together the scope of work and then coordinate it with the summer activities that's happening. So we are recommending an award to Molly Classic Sports Flooring in the amount of $24,700. The 2024 agreement was with Molly as well in the amount of $30,000. The difference is in scope of work. Any questions?
Just sort of quickly, didn't we recently look at some sort of bid for resurfacing middle school wood floors?
So we are replacing Holland Middle and North's floors.
Replacing it.
Completely replacing. In fact, there's my samples right there.
This isn't replacing that?
This is not replacing.
This is not connected to that project?
Not connected at all. This is our yearly maintenance that we do on the floors to make sure that they stay in the condition that they're in.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Next item is our wonderful HVAC filters bid. We received, I have a typo, 1, 2, 3, 4. We received 5 bids on Tuesday, April 22nd. Scope of work includes HVAC filters for all district buildings. And we are recommending an award with FSI Industries for $41,587.91. The previous agreement was with FSI for $52,544.18. The difference is my team did a hell of a job this year by going through each individual building and counting how many filters they have and how many we need. It sounds very simple, but it is not, because you have to go through your building and make sure you count every single filter 3 times a year and how many you need, and go through what you have in stock. So North and Holland Elementary are 2 examples that we do not need to buy filters this year. We have so many backstocked filters from previous years because this work wasn't done. So we are utilizing the attic stock that we have and moving forward. So hopefully, next year, the goal is that we buy the correct amount of filters for 3 changes a year at each of the buildings. So we are recommending that we go with FSI for $41,587.91. Any questions? Okay. Next one is emergency generator inspection and maintenance services bid. We received 4 bids on Tuesday, April 15th. Scope of work includes a 3-year agreement for annual inspection and preventative maintenance at 19 district-wide generators. We are recommending an award with Industrial Diesel Power, Inc., the amount of $36,000 for those 3 years. The previous agreement was with EMR Power for $31,480.94. EMR did increase, and so they were actually 3rd this year. So we are recommending going with Industrial Diesel Power for a 3-year agreement. Any questions? Okay. Certified Laboratory Services bid. We received 2 bids on Tuesday, April 17th. Scope of work includes a 5-year agreement to monitor the wastewater treatment and disposal system at Wrightstown Elementary. We did increase this. The previous agreement was a 3-year agreement, but I did increase it to a 5-year agreement. I believe that having the consistency across 5 years of the continual monitoring is very important at Wrightstown. So we're recommending award with Eurofins Environmental Testing Philadelphia LLC, the amount of $27,096, again for a 5-year agreement. The previous 3-year agreement was with ALS Environmental for $17,690.
How often do they test?
Once a month. And there's various testing that they do that honestly I don't understand all of it. They are the experts. They tell me when if there is a problem. We haven't had problems, so they do the testing and evaluation and report back to us.
Does it cost more if there's a problem, or it's all covered under this agreement?
Well, if there is a problem, then if there's repairs that we need to make, that would.
Testing. You said they don't always test. Do they further test, or did I misunderstand?
I think you misunderstood. I'm sorry. Yeah, they do testing monthly, and if there are problems, then they would report back to us what problems they're finding. If something's elevated, or they find something that's not supposed to be in there, they report back to us and make recommendations on how we repair whatever the issue is.
And we're mandated, required to do that.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they do all the reporting to the Pennsylvania DEP as well for us.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, next item is grease trap and septic tank pumping and disposal services. We are full of exciting things this month. We received 1 bid on Thursday, April 17th. Scope of work includes a 3-year agreement, and this is wonderful, to clean out district-wide grease traps twice a year, pump sulfine stone septic tank, and pump Wrightstown Lagoon as needed. I can get into what lagoon means, but it is not, you're not sitting out there on your lawn chair enjoying the sun at the lagoon. We are going to recommend award to Wind River Environmental. We have used Wind River Environmental last year when we had an issue at Sulfine Stone. They came out and pumped for us. And so we do have had interactions with them. So we are recommending the $52,220. The previous agreement was with Russell Reed Waste for $52,148. So there's a minimal increase with Wind River. Any questions? Okay. Next item is the ground truck replacement bid. It was a replacement for a grounds truck of a 2008 Ford with plow with over 86,000 miles. Unfortunately, no bids were received, so we don't take any actions on this. But I will be rebidding it for hopefully a winter delivery. And I can show you, this is the truck we'll be replacing. The transmission is shot. It's completely, the battery's dead. There are a plethora of issues. It's rusted out. It doesn't run anymore. It has been beat to the ground because it's a 2008 and it has plowed across the district. It has served us very well, but it is done. So I'll be bringing this back when we can rebid it.
Why wouldn't you get any bids? Like, that seems so strange.
So we were trying to spend the money for this budget year, and I asked for delivery by June 30th.
It was a delivery issue.
It was a delivery issue, absolutely. And the next one you'll see with the mail van, we're having the exact same issue. So, so we're going to have to rebid it
That
with a
makes
longer
sense. I was just
delivery.
curious why.
And same thing with the mail van replacement bid. This one we will take action on because it's a replacement of the 2007 Ford F-250 cargo van with 167,313 miles. The KBB value is $1,149. Repairs needed to pass next inspection is more than the value. So we're gonna have to evaluate, do we make the repairs? I don't know if we can rent something. We're gonna have to evaluate what we can do with the van because we only received one bid, but they could not guarantee delivery for June 30th. So we are gonna recommend rejection of this bid. And the reason why is because if we extend the delivery date, I believe that we'll get adequate bids. The company that did bid was out of Ohio, and they anticipate they'll have more supply in July. So if they're getting more supply in July, I'm sure there's plenty of other dealers that are going to have additional supplies, and hopefully we get better pricing. So I will be rebidding this, but I will be asking you guys to reject the bid for the mail van. Any questions? If you guys would like to see the mail van, it's outside. You can see there's a lot of rust on it. It has served us well. It delivers the mail across the district every single day, so it has a ton of miles on it and very little value left on it. So we have definitely used this van to the end of its life. Any questions?
Oh, just a quick one. So these two will appear as a rejection, not
You will only see
approval?
rejection for the mail van, because that's the only one that we received a bid on. The truck one, you won't see it on the board agenda, because we don't have to do anything with it. We didn't receive anything. I just brought it because I wanted to let you guys know that it was out there and that we're going to rebid it.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Out of curiosity, is this delivering internal mail?
Yes.
Between the buildings?
So it
It's
does-
not like
it
the
does-
post office delivers everything to Chancellor and then we have to distribute it?
It does both. So the post office does not deliver everything here. However, if there is, for instance, we just received all the full-day kindergarten signs. They all came here. They were all assembled here, and then we would put them in this van and distribute them to the schools. So I know Special Services gets a bunch of stuff here. End of summer, they put together all these boxes for teachers, and they go in the van and we distribute them. Larger stuff would go with, we have a box van as well, box truck. Larger stuff would go in the box truck, like, if we had furniture or something like that.
Anything else? Mr. Hildada?
Can we be, maybe, it's kind of a joke, but not really. How much longer will it be before we ditch the van and get a drone? I knew that would stump you. Okay, moving on. It's been a late night.
Next is the grounds equipment bid 2531. We received 5 bids on this past Tuesday. So we put a basis of design together for the worksite utility vehicle. Most people would understand that as a gator, and then 11-foot mower and a zero-turn mower. So the worksite vehicle from Robert E. Little, Inc. is a gator, and it does have a plow attachment to it. So we are asking to purchase 2, one for north and one for south. The ones that we have now were hand-me-downs from athletics many, many years ago, and they are done. We just repaired one at North as a Band-Aid until we could move forward with the purchase of 2 new ones. The next is the 11-foot mower, and we received 5 bids for that. As you can see, there is one price at $65,000 for Moyer and Sons. The basis of design for this did include, it was a John Deere mower. It did include, so on the 11-foot, there's the main mower underneath the cab, and then there's the 2 wings that fold up. We need the ability to turn off those 2 wings if we're in a smaller location, or put one of the wings down and mow with that. The one that came from Moyer, it's called an X-Mark. It is produced by Toro, but it does not give us the ability to turn off the blades to make it a smaller mower. And it also does not come in 4-wheel drive. I'm sure you guys have been to all of our schools, and the terrain that we mow on, we definitely need it in 4-wheel drive. So we have eliminated the X-Mark 1 from Moyer. So the next lowest price is from Robert E. Little, from John Deere, at the cost of $70,367.23. Then we go to the zero-turn mower, which again, the basis of design was a John Deere, and the low cost for that is from Central Jersey Equipment in the amount of $15,338.51. All of these prices are per unit. So when you look at the recommended award, the worksite utility vehicle from Robert E. Little, quantity of 2, for $60,792.94. They have confirmed that we would get them prior to June 30th. We have an 11-foot mower from Robert E. Little, Inc. for a quantity of 2 in the amount of $140,734.46. They also have confirmed that they can deliver 2 of them prior to June 30th. And then the zero-turn mower from Central Jersey Equipment, quantity of 3, the amount of $46,051.53. So the total awarded amount to the 2 companies would be $247,542.93. Obviously the worksite vehicles are needed, and then the 11-foot mower, 2 of them. One I have decommissioned because the safeties were no longer being used, so the piece of equipment is not safe to use. And then we have another one that is ready to die. So before we lose that second piece and it shuts down part of our mowing operations, we would like to purchase the mower. And then the zero turns are replacing existing equipment that the zero turns are used just about every day in the spring, summer, and fall. So those are getting towards the end of our useful life, so we need to start replacing equipment.
I'm okay with, like, you guys, I see them out there all the time working hard. The whole district's down to 1 11-foot mower at this point?
No, we do have 2 11-foot mowers running right now.
So altogether we have 3?
So altogether, we will have 3.5.
Right, the half doesn't count. What happens when what happens to the equipment? when it's no longer valuable?
We usually run them to the ground, so we can either attempt to auction them off. The one with the safeties that's irreparable, we'll just strip down and scrap.
I mean, even that, you can sell scrap at auction, but I don't know, that's good. I'm glad to hear you do something with it, and it's tracked and all that. Someone will take it and fix it. I always trash pick that stuff.
But these are, the one is beyond.
Trash pick 11.
So the one is actually, we have picked items off of it. So it's to the point where it's just down to metal.
Okay. I was just always curious about that,
Yep.
like that, pianos, and anything else that I'm
So
picking
what
out
we
in the trash.
did with the mail van, and shout out to Matt Adams for giving me the idea. We actually, when we bid out the mail van, we put on there what a trade-in value would be, so that they could take the vehicle, do whatever they need to do with it, and take the value off of the bid.
Cool.
So the truck we didn't, because obviously there's no value left in the truck. It's shot and completely rusted out. But anything that does have value, we would do a trade-in value for vehicles.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the grounds equipment? Okay. Next item is a deduct change order. This is a deduct change order for TE Construction for unused allowance money in the amount of $726.25. This is a security-related item, and so that's why it's pretty vague, but it is a deduct change order to close the project out. Any questions? Okay. Next item is north and south hot and chilled water pump replacement change order. This is a change order for ASL refrigeration, the amount of $4,944.26 to close this project out. Additional costs were associated with additional electrical work and an additional backnet card for south. So the electrical work, we thought when we were during design phase, it was believed that there was a circuit for a pump, but it turns out that the circuit needed to be replaced, so along with the breaker. And then the additional backnet card for south. So a backnet card ties into Siemens. It's a card that is it's a communication card that Siemens can tie into, so we needed to add one for south. Any questions? Okay, this change order closes this project out. Next item is South All-Weather Track Resurfacing Deduct Change Order. Deduct change order for American Athletic Track and Turf for unused allowance money in the amount of $99,000. We basically had this much money in there in case when we milled, if we needed to do full depth replacement underneath the track. This does not close this project out. There's still some damage to some drains on the inside of the track that we're working with them to get repaired. And we still owe them over $100,000 on this contract. But this is just paperwork to begin to close out this project. Any questions? Okay. Next item is Schrader Group Letter of Assignment Agreement. If you guys remember, about a year ago, Dewey transitioned into CHA. Schrader Group is doing the same thing. They are joining Horde, Copeland, Mach Architects, HCM, keep doing that, HCM Architects. So they're requesting approval of letter of assignment for the following projects. It's Hillcrest Elementary, Feinstone Elementary, Richboro Elementary, and the master plan study. And unfortunately, David, I'm sure he would love to talk about this. He's very excited about joining HCM. But yeah, so the agreements are attached to transition into that. David assured me that he's still going to stay the Schrader Group representative in Philadelphia. So the staffing on the projects and then the transition, it'll just be a name change basically for what I see. And additional resources too, because it's a much larger company that if we need something different and we need some help on something, there's additional resources within the company. Any questions?
I just have one on, were there any changes as far as administration for him that he's lost any of that, or is it just gone to be combined?
They're just going to be combined. When I talked to David, he let me know that he is of a certain age and he needs to start making decisions on what his company looks like in the next 10 years. So this gives his company longevity by joining with HCM. We have Johnson Controls Preventative Maintenance Service Agreement for Metasys. The Metasys program is utilized to control the HVAC equipment at 12 of our buildings with Johnson Controls equipment. Preventative maintenance agreement includes upgrades to the latest versions and installations of available patches, and it includes a 10% discount on any additional labor that we may need. This has not been done in a number of years. The main purpose of this is to make sure that we have the latest upgrades, and if there are any kind of patches, that those get implemented into our software. So year one is a cost of $25,980, and this includes a district-wide upgrade or update to the latest version. It's been a number. I don't know how many years it's been since we've been updated for Metasys. So that's why the additional cost. And then the following 4 years are general maintenance costs for the Metasys program. By updating this and keeping it updated with Johnson Controls, it ensures that we have the latest software for Metasys and prevents breakdowns for us. So it would be a total cost across 5 years of $66,532. Any questions? Finally, last slide. Go ahead.
One thing on the last board meeting, we had a parent come and present to us this regarding the high school south, where the band room is, and he kind of gave this handout where he was talking about, having a canopy, as he called it. So we need to know where do we want to go with this? Do we want to, as a board, do we want to have looked at?
Yeah. May I?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there was some conversation with, I think, Jess, and I'm just wondering about what your initial feedback is on the feasibility.
We absolutely can take a look at the option. I think when we briefly talked about it at our prep meeting, determined that the hallways, or the windows that you see are just hallways. There are some hurdles to it, specifically locations of bathrooms and the general usage of it and what we would be using it for. But it's definitely something that we could investigate. I think the gentleman that came and spoke, forgive me, his name is escaping me right now.
Jeff Vaughn.
Thank you. He was, his main concern was Color Guard having access to the building and different areas within the building. And with the amount of sports that happen in the gym, with PIAA sports, they get pushed into the cafeteria, and then they get pushed into the auditorium, and they just consistently get pushed around the building. So I think he came with some creative options to ask for us to look into if there are any options for like a large practice area, not just for Color Guard, but to kind of free up some space and for some other groups as well.
All those windows are hallway? Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
So the idea is, I'm sorry, this would be a canopy over what's now open space.
So right now, it's all grass. If you look at the one side, it's grass, and I think there's a couple sheds in there for my team. I forget exactly what they keep in there, mowers, that kind of stuff. We would have to obviously put a foundation in, floor and walls, and then a roof. I don't think it's just a canopy, because if you just put a canopy in there, you can't use it, in the fall and winter and in the
That's what I
early
was
spring.
thinking, yeah.
If we're making it conditioned space, we have to look to see if the boilers and the chillers are appropriately sized, and what that space actually looks like. You're talking, electric in there, lighting, that kind of stuff. But, if you guys would like us to investigate it, I'm not sure where it fits into, the capital planning that we're doing. He came in and it was a short discussion I think he even spoke, if I remember correctly, he spoke at the end of our meeting of public comment.
Yes.
My concerns are egress requirements and natural lighting, as well as the space need. But if this is something your department could look at, and in consultation with administration, to evaluate how much space this program needs and how many other programs could benefit from this space. It doesn't have to be where the individual recommended, but it could be. If this is something that, at least preliminarily, we could look at to see what sort of problems or how close the solution is. I'm okay with that.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so what I'll come back with next is having a discussion with Buff and the team that's over at South to see what the needs are of the program, kind of come up with what the square footage of that space could possibly be, and to see if it meets the needs of the school.
Great.
Okay. And then the two things that are upcoming, again, master planning study, and then Churchville backflow preventer replacement in June. My world is not glamorous, it's not exciting, but it keeps the kids in the building and teachers continuing to teach.
Warm, safe, and dry.
Good. Any questions? Ms. Khan, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good at this time, thank you.
Then we are adjourned.
Board,